Chanukah Sameach. So here at Tanakh and Tea, we usually record our episodes 2 weeks in advance. So we were recording the latest episode the night before Chanukah with our guest Elan Teichman, which you will hear that episode in about a week and a half. But we couldn't help ourselves because it was the night before Chanukah. We started talking about Chanukah, and it wouldn't make sense to release that 11 and a half months before the next Chanukah. So I decided to pull out the little discussion about Chanukah, about 18, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And I'm going to play that for you now. And I'll probably pull that out of the next episode. So when you listen to the next episode, just keep in mind that that conversation was in there somewhere, because I'm sure it'll be connected. But I had to make sure you heard this message on Chanukah. So Chanukah is a trap. Enjoy. And thank you, Elan, for joining us. You'll hear more about him when we play the episode in full. Chanukah Sameach.
With light, with there's a deeper meaning. Why are we doing this?
So you just sparked a thought of mine that I'm going to go off and talk about Chanukah right now.
Let's go.
And I think I'm going to pull this out and post this as just, because this episode is going to come out in
Snippet.
2 weeks. I'm going to post this as just a special Chanukah, because I think it's, at Tanakh TV, I guess it's wrong of us not to give people something for the holiday. So I have this thought based off what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Allow me to go through it, and then I'll take your comments on it. But this is my Chanukah thought, and I told this to my students yesterday, and my 9th grade girls actually started clapping afterwards, which is like, as a teacher, it's like if you're a high schoolers who naturally want to, have a free period, if they're gonna clap for you afterwards, that means like you said something right. So Chanukah is a trap. Chanukah is an absolute trap. Why is it a trap? Well, if you go through the holidays, Pesach is about the Exodus, right? Shavuot is about receiving the Torah, right? Purim is about being saved from annihilation, etc., etc. Chanukah is about rejecting outside culture. And it's become so ironic in the way Chanukah is celebrated in America that it's celebrated via outside culture. It's the most common holiday that Jews and non-Jews know, amongst the Jewish holidays now. And you can make an argument it's maybe the least important in terms of that it's rabbinical, right? That and Purim. And it's become Christmified and Americanized. I don't mean Christian Christmified. It's commercialized. The American Christmas has also become capitalized, but it's become Christmas. It's become Jewish Christmas. And the reason why I say that's ironic is because there is some historical suggestion that maybe Purim has picked up other aspects of things, but it's ironic because this would be like celebrating Purim by killing Jews. This would be like celebrating Pesach by eating chametz. This would be like celebrating Shavuot by breaking the Torah. Meaning, it's not you're just doing a holiday via non-Jewish culture. You're doing a holiday that's about rejecting non-Jewish culture with non-Jewish culture. It's ironic. It's the very opposite of what the meaning of Chanukah is.
Wow.
It's not, it's different than if you were doing it for any other holiday. If Shavuot would happen to be this time of year in December, it would have happened to Shavuot. And we used to have a Shavuot bush, happens to be, before Christmas, and we stopped doing it because it seemed too similar. But meaning it happens to be that Chanukah, which is about this, ends up this time of year. It doesn't seem like it's an accident from Hashem. But the irony of Chanukah is really amazing. So based off what I just said, you might come to the conclusion that it is absolutely wrong the way we're celebrating Chanukah in America. You're right. My students then asked me when I said this to them and I pointed out the irony, they were like, oh my gosh, right, I have Chanukah sweaters and Chanukah gifts and everything like that. Am I doing Chanukah completely wrong, the exact opposite of the way it's supposed to be? And some rabbis will tell you absolutely yes, right? Some rabbis will tell you, it's fine if you do your Christmas stuff, but you call it Christmas, meaning it's fine when you celebrate Thanksgiving, but it's secular. It's another thing when you make it Jewish. But just another point before I give you my thought on it. Even the dreidels, there's historical suggestion that the dreidels were Christmas objects in Germany, and we turned it into Jewish items, and then we just outlasted them. Meaning, if America stops giving gifts today, we'll still keep doing it. Once Jews start a custom,
Totally.
That's it. It's forever now. We outlast
It's
everyone.
on the books.
It's on the books. But even the dreidels, which you might call now Jewish, is the old gifts. So what's going on with Hanukkah? This is not even a new thing. This is an old thing. So I have an answer. And my answer is as follows. If you look at our relationship with the Greeks, it wasn't always butting heads that were rejecting the outside culture. If you look 167 years before the Chanukah story, when Alexander the Great was meeting Shimon HaTzadik put on beautiful clothing, put on the Kohen Gadol garb to go meet him, right? He put on beautiful clothing to go meet him and had a great relationship, Shimon HaTzadik and Alexander the Great, where Alexander the Great bowed down to him and Shimon HaTzadik said, I've been praying for you. And we see there wasn't a rejection of Greek culture. And if you look at the bracha of Noach to his children, the bracha was
Yafta Elokim Liyefes, right?
Yafta Elokim Liyefet V'yishkon Be'elehei Shem, right? Ve'i Kanan Eved Lamo. We'll talk about Kanan later. So, but he's saying that he's not being anti-Yefet, which of course is where the Greeks come from, but it needs to be a means to an end. It needs to beautify the tents of shame, meaning there's nothing wrong with beauty. There's nothing wrong necessarily even with Greek culture if it's to beautify the tents of shame. We're not anti-beauty, and even if you look at Hanukkah, really to do the mitzvah of Hanukkah, you only need to light one candle each night. But yet Hanukkah is one of those mitzvot that we do the majority of Hiddur mitzvah. It is about beauty. So you see, we're not anti-Greek culture, but here's where Chanukah is a trap. Based off what I'm just saying, that means there is a world in which it is okay to take American culture, right? The same way Shimon HaTzadik was not anti-Alexander the Great. They named all the boys born that year Alexander. And Yafet is supposed to be in the tents of shame, and Greek is the only language you're allowed to read the Sefer Torah in because it's considered beautiful, meaning we're not anti their culture when it's to a means of serving Hashem. But when it's not to a means of serving Hashem and it's about serving the beauty itself, which is what the Greeks eventually became by the time of the Chanukah story, then we have to die to get rid of it, even though they're not trying to kill us physically. Now we have to die over that, which means Chanukah is this massive trap. Because if you take American culture and Christmas culture, but you use it to uplift Hashem and use it to uplift, your religion, and you have to honestly be doing that, not just to have a good time, then that seems to be okay. That seems to be in line with Noach's bracha and in line with Shimon HaTzadik. But the second you're doing it just because you enjoy doing it, and you're just doing it because this is Jewish Christmas and it's Hanukkah culture and whatever, now not only are you not doing Hanukkah correct, now you're what the Maccabees were willing to die for.
Wow.
So Hanukkah is this amazing holiday where there's such a fine line in doing it correct versus doing the exact opposite of what's supposed to be, and you're mamish, you're supposed to be dying instead of celebrating Hanukkah. So meaning Pesach's so much easier, just don't eat chametz. Purim is so much. Hanukkah is a trap.
But
Hanukkah is an absolute trap.
It's so deep though. It's such a deep, like saying the line, don't get lost in the sauce. But like Hanukkah, like I was thinking, I have a question. Why do you think so many Jews were seduced by Hellenic culture?
Just real quick, I read this today. I already said this to my students yesterday, and I read this today.
Yeah.
And happened to prove it.
Yeah.
I'm quoting Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, who wrote the Pnei Halacha. And he writes over here, I was looking at the Halachas of Hanukkah. He writes over here in a footnote, he writes, the Greeks' worldview stemmed from nature, and since there are different forces in nature, they believed in multiple gods. In addition, since nature has no values, only strength, beauty, and external wisdom, they yearned for these things. In contrast, Judaism is based on the belief in one God, who created nature, but who himself transcends it. The goal is to discover God's oneness in the world, to reveal the image of God within man through morals, the Torah, and the mitzvot. The Greeks cannot coexist with us because our belief in one God and our ethical values undermine the foundation of their worldview. Judaism, however, can coexist with Greek culture and use it as a tool for research, classification, and the revelation of Jewish concepts. So that's literally proof to what I just said. That's the trap of Chanukah. We can have Greek culture and a Sefer Torah in Greek, but it needs to be for Hashem. But if it's just them on their own, now it's completely anti-ethical, and we have to die for that.
So why did so many Jews get it? I would say let's use the ancient question example and let's
because there's still beauty in it. That's the whole catch.
Saying
meaning. I'll give you an example.
They get seduced by it.
Elan, if I went to FSU right now,
Yeah,
and I was around a bunch of people who have never met a Jew in their life.
Yeah.
And I see them breaking Shabbos.
Yeah.
Am I inclined to break Shabbos because they are?
No.
No, I don't relate to them. They don't come from my culture. But if I go to a Jewish college, but there's Jews around me who are breaking Shabbos, is there maybe a thought that I might break Shabbos now?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I see myself in them. They are like me.
Right.
So I think that's the catch here, that the Greeks, they do have a role in Judaism. What they represent has a role. There's beauty in it. And American culture and the morals of America, we're not anti it necessarily. It has a role in Judaism. But that's the trap. You can get lost in the role.
That's the end in itself.
If it's Hitler, then you don't see yourself in him.
Right.
It's clearly antithetical to Judaism. But if it's got some truth to it, this is where the trap falls.
So bring it to today, because bring it to 2024, almost 2025. How do you think most Jews are getting seduced, and what are they getting seduced by? Hanukkah is supposed to remind us, don't fall into the trap. What's the modern trap?
Well, one is just pleasure. One is just without even just the pleasure of the modern world.
Yeah.
Enjoying life. And two, I think if you're somebody who actually has thought, you could be trapped by the modern morals and the modern values and things like that. It's considered, the Hellenized Jews said to themselves, enough with the old Jew, enough. Torah's 1,000 years old. The Greeks got it. They have
Let's study Socrates and Plato and Aristotle.
So if you're not a thoughtful person, you could see the flashing lights. That's enough to get you.
Yeah.
And if you are a thoughtful person, there is actual beauty in the wisdom. It's not just emptiness.
Like the Rambam was into Aristotle.
Exactly.
Saying, but the mistake in ancient times was, okay, like Aristotle's amazing, so now forget about the Torah. He says, no, that's not what it is. It's supposed to understand everything's under the Torah, and Aristotle has his place. But what do you think but what's the modern conception of that? Dad, what would you say? What's the what Josh is saying, what's the modern application of Hanukkah to real 2024, 2025 people? Like, it's nice to light a menorah. We all know it's not about lighting a menorah. It's about now. So what are we actually doing? What is Hanukkah to us?
I'll let Debbie go in a second. I think Hanukkah really is about finding your identity and being Jewish and rejecting outside culture, but not necessarily with rejecting outside culture, as we just said. Which means maybe you could use the outside culture, but you need to use it to uplift your identity. It's not necessarily being anti everything that's going on around you, but you have to use it. And if you don't use it,
anti the way they do it.
If you don't use it as a means to an end, and you use it just as a means to a means,
right?
Now you have a huge problem. That's the trap. It's such a fine line. And that, to me, that's the simple goal of Hanukkah.
Nice.
Which is, the reality is we are living in America. The reality is we do pick up culture around us, right?
Of course.
The differences between Ashkenazim and Sephardim,
of course,
are 99% the same. What's the difference? The difference is the non-Jews around them throughout the 2,000 years and the different things that they picked up. So you can't. The Rambam was clearly influenced by the culture around him, by Spanish culture around him, right? Rashi was clearly influenced by French culture. You can't fight it. Hanukkah is the attempt to fight it, and ultimately they lost. So ultimately they did lose. So I know it's like crazy to say on Hanukkah, because on Hanukkah we're celebrating like the short-lived victory, but it's short-lived. So ultimately, I think the answer really is to be able to take the culture and strip it down and infuse it to, meaning we spoke about converts earlier in this episode. Some of our best waves come from converts. It said that during the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, we had a bunch of converts come in and reignite Judaism, right? Sometimes you need fresh blood, right? So meaning we're not necessarily, I don't think necessarily the answer is being anti everything around you, but it's using it to uplift who you are. But that's such a fine line, because you might get lost in using it to enjoy it.
Right.
And now you have to die for that. That's Hanukkah. So I think that's the trap of Hanukkah, and I think that's the fine line of Hanukkah that you have to walk.
Wow.
It's very, very Hanukkah is not easy to pull off.
Yeah. Debbie, what do you say?
I think that on an individual level, we can use Hanukkah to try and find our own light within ourselves, to try and not fall into the trap that you're saying. The mitzvah is literally lighting a menorah, right? And bringing light into the world. And I think that flame could ignite a flame within ourselves to take away that possibility of going in that direction on an individual basis. Lighting the menorah, bringing what Hanukkah is supposed to mean truly, not just like the gift giving, all that. It's like, what are we doing?
Nice. Now putting it together, when you guys are speaking, just circling back to the original pasuk, it sounds like, Josh, your framework of Hanukkah is that the Klal Yisrael in 165 BCE, so we're talking a little over 2100 years ago, they were surrounded by a culture that viewed the Olympics and the body and business and philosophy as like the be all and end all of what humanity is. They just felt the kivshua, right? The conquer the world, like development. Let's develop secular development of humanity. So no, Hanukkah is about that. There's a godliness, there's a light, there's a kindness, there's a divinity to what we're trying to do. There's a holiness to our lives. I think you're saying that what that means in all of our lives is like Hanukkah is about we're put on earth to develop and build ourselves in the world, but ultimately under like Hashem's name. And we can't get lost, like you said, and people think like, oh, my goal is to be a businessman. My whole life is about winning the NBA championship. My life is to make money. You could do those things. That's they're saying, Josh, there's a place for all those things. But with the light of Hanukkah, it's like, why are we doing these in general? It's because we're trying to spread kindness and godliness and light and whatever. And that's the modern iteration. It's that we could actually do all the things that the world's involved in, but the Klal Yisrael way of doing it, the David HaMelech way of doing it, is to do it as an Eved Hashem. So that's what's powerful. At Bereshis, we're learning what does it mean to be a member of humanity, and all the way back from thousands of years ago to today is that it means to build and develop, but it means with the right approach.
Just to be clear, I think what I said today, I think you probably would have a lot of people who would reject what I said. I think at face value, they might say Hanukkah is just about straight up rejecting outside culture, and we're just doing it completely wrong. And the trap is just that Hashem set it up that it's become outside culture. The problem with that, in my opinion, I think that might be the MS. It could be the MS. The problem with that is I don't think it works in the long run. Meaning just like it didn't actually work out for the Jews of the Chanukah story in the long run, and eventually the Maccabees' own children became Jason.
Yeah.
Look at their names even, right? And I think ultimately when I tell this to my students and I tell them I start off essentially hating on everything that their Hanukkah is, they're like, whoa, we can't celebrate Hanukkah. And I took away Hanukkah. I'm the Grinch that stole Hanukkah. And they listen to what I said as MS. But I think if I stick with that, they're just going to do it anyway. And now they're going to be worshiping these cultures of America for the purpose of it. But the second I flip it now and I say, no, you can use it, but you have to direct it towards spirituality, that's how we outlast everyone. Meaning we pick up the cultures of America with its good parts,
right,
and of Europe and of the Muslim world, right? And this ultimately is what we did. And we borrow these things. We take these things, and Hashem spread us around the world to pick up more things and to pick up converts, right, and whatever. So then we come back to Israel much more whole and whatever. So I think naturally you might look at Hanukkah as it truly is just about rejecting everything. But I think if you take a deeper look, we lose like that. We got a temporary win with Hanukkah like that. But in order to outlast everyone, you need to beautify the tents of shame with these outside cultures. But it's such a fine line. It's so difficult to do correctly because you can so easily just worship the culture itself, which is unfortunately the reality is what is happening in America. Like a lot of people are celebrating Hanukkah like that, and they essentially are celebrating Pesach by being Egyptian. Like that's essentially
get lost in the sauce.
Yeah. So don't fall into the trap of Hanukkah. That's my message.
Wow.
Use it. I'm not. Again, you want to give gifts and do all the American stuff. You gotta also uplift your spirituality. It's got to be a means to an end.
Wow.
Then that's our Kiddush for today.